What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Haven't made a video in about a week because, quite frankly, there hasn't been much to talk about. There's been little stories here and there, but I'm kind of just waiting until the draft gets here so we see what this roster is going to look like and we know what the future of the New York Giants looks like going into 2022. And this draft right now, my objective, if I'm the New York Giants general manager going in, we have so many holes on this roster. Just get the best players you possibly can. I think in the first round, you always have to try to take need into account, specifically the right tackle position. And I don't want the New York Giants getting out of the first round without a right tackle. I think it is that imperative for both Daniel Jones and the potential quarterback that in the future may replace Daniel Jones to get that side of the line situated. Last year, the New York Giants had an opportunity to take Rashawn Slater. Had they done that, we wouldn't be in this situation. But as we all know, Dave Gettleman didn't do the best job of roster evaluation. So as I see it right now as a Giants fan, I think if nothing else in the first round, you have got to come out of it with a right tackle. After that, if I'm the Giants, I look on this roster. You tell me if you're watching this video, unless we keep James Bradbury, where on this roster do you see a position where the New York Giants don't need at least a moderate to significant upgrade? At the safety spot, of course, we lost Jabril Peppers and Logan Ryan. Maybe you want to argue that you think Julian Love could be a long-term answer at that position. The linebacker, you have a Blake Martinez coming off of injury and not much else outside of that. Yeah, I know Tate Crowder was decent last year. We all agree we need an upgrade at the edge rusher. Our interior nose tackle is bad. So on the defense, it's all over. On the offense, interior offensive line, tackle, wide receiver could certainly use an upgrade. We could use an extra punch in the backfield. So, and of course, quarterback. So there is really not a position on this team that you could say that doesn't potentially need an upgrade. So as a Giants fan going into this draft, for me, it's addressing the offensive tackle and then finding the best players I possibly can throughout this draft to fill some of the needs. I think this is going to be a multi-year process. I think Giants fans need to realize that, and it will not be solved in year one under the Joe Schoen regime. Now, in this video, I kind of wanted to go over all the different various scenarios I could see the New York Giants being put through in the first round of this year's draft, and there's a lot of them. And I'm sure I'm not going to go over every single one. I may leave out one or two that you guys wanted to see. I apologize if that's the case. It's why I asked on Twitter. But I want to go over some of the realistic scenarios. I'm not going to have the Giants trading down with both the 5 and 7 pick. If you're here to see that, to me, that's fantasy land. I don't see the Giants being able to find 2 trade partners to trade back with. I will go over all the potential scenarios that I could see realistically the Giants trading back with either the 5th or 7th pick. And I definitely think that's a realistic possibility. The one thing that I want to see going into this draft, though, I don't want the Giants to trade down just to trade down. I feel like a lot of Giants fans are looking at the New York Giants salary cap and saying to themselves, we have to trade down. We have to trade down. We can't afford to pay our draft picks. The way I look at it is right now, the New York Giants need cornerstone pieces. And unless I'm blown away by a trade offer, I'm not trading down. Now, if I don't love a player at number 7 or 5, that may change my opinion. But if I really like a player there, I'm making it work with the salary cap. I will backload salaries to be able to have a player that I love under a rookie salary for the next 4 or 5 years. So as a Giants fan, I don't want them to just trade down for the purpose of it. If you're going to trade down, you better be getting future draft capital. And by that, I mean a 2023 first round pick. That is what I would prefer as a New York Giants fan. The reason is obvious: to have the insurance in case Daniel Jones does not progress to become that franchise quarterback, to go up and get your guy in 2023 or potentially a future draft if you're not in a position to take one in next year's draft. You could then trade back and get more future draft capital. Something what the Philadelphia Eagles did going into this draft. The Eagles, of course, made that trade recently where they got a future first-round pick. That is what I want the New York Giants to do if they're looking to trade down. But if you have an opportunity to get 2 franchise game-changing players at 5 and 7, sometimes it's the best-case scenario if you stay put. I know all Giants fans get excited when they hear about future draft picks, and trust me, I am as well. But if you go back in time, if you're being honest with yourselves, would you have rather had Micah Parsons or the 5th overall or the 7th overall pick in this year's draft to Kadarius Toney? I think long and hard about it. Would you rather have Rashawn Slater and not have to worry about the tackle position and have Kadarius Toney and a draft pick in which you're probably going to take a tackle with that draft pick anyway? So we'll see how it all plays out. I'm excited for the draft. Let's jump into all the different various scenarios that I could see the New York Giants facing in the first round of this year's draft. Let's pull up the draft board. And yeah, like I said, there were so many different scenarios. The first scenario, I'm just going to play it status quo. I'm not going to have the Giants trading down. I'm going to stay at 5 and 7. I've done a mock draft before, and I do think in the end the New York Giants are going to get a tackle with that 5th overall pick if they stay put. But let's start the draft. First pick, Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, we've heard rumors that they could potentially take Trayvon Walker. I'm going to go with the consensus. I'm going to stick with Aiden Hutchinson in this scenario. I will go over my best case scenario, at least in a realistic setting that I could see playing out for the New York Giants. But we're going to stick with Aiden Hutchinson with the first overall pick here to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Next up, I've said pretty consistently, I don't care what the reports are coming out. People questioning Kayvon Thibodeau's love for the game, this, that, the other thing. I think Kayvon Thibodeau will be evaluated as the second best edge rusher in this class. That is what I will have. I'll have the Detroit Lions taking him at second overall. Third overall, Houston Texans. I think they go offensive line. And then the question becomes, is it Evan Neal? Is it Aquanu? Is it Cross? I think a lot of people are undervaluing Cross. I think he's better than some people give him credit for. And I wouldn't even be shocked if the Giants had Cross above one of these two individuals on their draft board. I personally think Evan Neal's probably the safest bet. But I'm going to have to use the Texans going for upside in this, like I did in my previous mock draft, going with Aquanu. Aquanu is a very impressive talent. And if you ask me today, if I had to guess, I'd have them taking Aquanu, but could easily see them taking Evan Neal. Fourth to the Jets. Now, the Jets have taken two early offensive linemen in the most recent drafts. They, of course, signed an offensive lineman in free agency this year as well, formerly from the San Francisco 49ers. So it's something they certainly prioritize, but all reports have come out that the New York Jets are very interested in addressing the edge rusher position or potentially the cornerback spot. So I could easily see them taking Sauce Gardner here as well. I think in the end, they're going to go edge. I think they're going to go edge, and I think they'll go with the upside prospect that you're seeing starting to creep up draft boards. I'm going to have the Jets take a Trayvon Walker. Maybe some people feel that's a reach. Maybe Jets fans watching this don't like that. But right now, if you ask me today, that is what I would have them doing. Now, they could easily, like I said, go Sauce Gardner. They could even potentially go with a wide receiver. I'm not going to have that. Next up, the New York Giants. In this situation, you run to the podium, you take your tackle. In my opinion, the best tackle on the board is Evan Neal. Of course, maybe you could argue Charles Cross, but I think it's Evan Neal. I think you get that situated, you're done. Sixth overall to the Carolina Panthers. If there's no trade scenarios, I think we could all agree that the Panthers could use a quarterback for the future. They could also use a lot of help on that offensive line. So I think Charles Cross is very much in play here, and I would not be shocked at all if they took Charles Cross, even if Malik Willis was on the board. Malik Willis to me is a complete wild card, like most quarterbacks are in this draft. I could see him going anywhere from 2 to like 30. So it's going to be a crazy draft at the quarterback position. In this scenario, I will have them taking the quarterback. I'll have them taking Malik Willis, who is ranked 25th on this mock, but most people have him going 16th, at least in terms of average draft position. But I'm going to the Carolina Panthers at 6th. And then the Giants at 7. And then I'll reset this and go over another scenario. Giants at 7, like I've had in several other mock drafts, and this is based off the assumption that we're going to move on from James Bradberry. If we do not move on from James Bradberry, I think we probably go edge here. So let me preface it by saying that the Giants may not move off of James Bradberry. We may stick with Bradberry. I still think it's possible we could go Sauce Gardner or a cornerback, Stingley, whoever, with this pick, even if we were to keep James Bradberry. I could see the New York Giants looking at Bradberry as a one-year stopgap, a guy that could potentially transition into a Logan Ryan type role with this football team. Some of my subscribers have brought that up in the past, being that he's kind of more of a zone cornerback. I still think it's possible we could take a corner here. But if Bradberry's still on the roster, I think we probably lean edge. At that point, which edge would they take? Your guess is as good as mine. It comes down to their draft board. Could be George Karlaftis. Could be a number of players. Could be Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State. So that is what I think they would lean if they still have James Bradberry on the roster. But if James Bradberry is not on the roster, or if the plans are for him not to be on the roster when the year starts, I think they will take Ahmad Gardner. And that's what I've had my first and second mock draft for the Giants. I've had them getting both Evan Neal and Ahmad Gardner. And if things stay status quo, at least for me, that is how I see things playing out right now. Now we're going to reset this. We're going to go over another scenario in which I think the Giants could be facing something different. We'll go over just the first round. Won't do trades just quite yet. We'll do all teams again. And let's dive into it. In the first situation, I had Aiden Hutchinson going first. I had only one offensive tackle going in the first 4 picks. This scenario will switch it up. And to me, this is not an ideal scenario. This is a near doomsday scenario. This is not what I want to see happen on draft night. But as Giants fans, we have to realize we could be faced with a lot of different scenarios. Some we're going to like more than others. Let's start the draft. Okay, let's just stick with Aiden Hutchinson going first overall for now to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Second overall, I can't see the Detroit Lions taking an offensive lineman, especially being that they took one early last year. So I'm going to stick with the same top 2. Third overall, use the Texans. Let's say they go with the same player, Aquanu. Then the Jets. In this scenario, instead of going a defense, they elect to continue to rebuff that offensive line. They get another really strong tackle, and they go with Evan Neal. So now Giants fans are left with potentially taking the third best tackle if you want to go tackle, or taking the best defensive player on your board. Who would that be in this spot? Well, I mean, you look at the board right now in this scenario, it's probably, if it's edge, it's probably going to be Trayvon Walker. If I had to guess, he's been a guy that's been moving up mock draft charts. If it's a corner, it's going to be a Sauce Gardner. Or you could go Charles Cross. Now, some Giants fans would say, oh, you should pass to Charles Cross, try to get him at 7. But I could easily argue if you're the Giants, you have to at least consider that the Carolina Panthers could take him at 6th overall. And in this scenario, it's not so much what I would do, it's what I could see the New York Giants doing. And like I said in my previous mock draft scenario, I would not be shocked if the Giants had Cross ranked higher than one of the 2 other tackles in this draft class. The Giants have done a lot of research on Cross. Reports have come out that he's a very good pass blocker. In fact, most people feel like he's probably the best pass blocker in this year's draft class, but he needs some work in the run blocking department. He played in an air raid scheme, however, where they didn't run the football a whole lot. And some people worry about that. I've heard people bring up comparisons to Andre Dillard, things of that nature. But if the Giants like Charles Cross and they feel he could play at the right tackle spot, they're going to identify that as their biggest need. So I think in this spot, you're either taking Charles Cross at 5 or you're going defense. You're taking Trayvon Walker or Sauce Gardner, potentially one of the other edge rushers, right? Where, whoever they have highest ranked on their board. I think they're going to go the safe bet here. I think they would still go Charles Cross at 5, knowing that they're still going to have a good pick at 7 with one of those defensive players they'd be able to snag, and they desperately need to show up that tackle position. So I still think the Giants would potentially take Charles Cross in this situation if the 2 tackles were up the board. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I've said for a long time now, I think only 1 tackle is going in the top 4, but if this were to happen, I would not be surprised at all if the Giants took Cross 5th overall. 6th, we'll stick with the same thing because I do think it's very possible if teams don't trade ahead of the Carolina Panthers, they will stand pat and take Malik Willis or their first quarterback on their board. It could be Kenny Pickett. For the Giants' purposes, it really doesn't matter if they're not going quarterback. So we'll have Malik Willis going to the Carolina Panthers. Now the Giants are up. Same type of scenario. You already got your offensive lineman. Now it comes down to who do you value higher? Do you value the high-end, talent and potential prospect in Trayvon Walker, who a lot of people are really excited about due to the fact that he had a really strong combine. He looked terrific in the college playoffs, but his numbers and production isn't necessarily there. Some of the people will point to the fact that he played for Georgia, where he didn't get the most of an opportunity to display his full potential. So for me, it's either Gardner or Walker here. What would the Giants do here? I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, it's a coin flip. I could see Gardner. I could see a guy like Trayvon Walker. For the sake of being different in this scenario, I will have them taking Trayvon Walker. Now, if the Giants were to do this and you got Cross and Walker, which again is not my ideal scenario, I wouldn't hate it. You get a high upside edge rusher and you get yourself, a very capable right tackle. I think in the second round, you're probably looking in the secondary, potentially a guy like Petre, a safety, a guy like Brisker, I had mocked in my first mock draft. I think you need to try to address that secondary. But again, I could easily see them taking Sauce Gardner once again at 7th overall in this scenario. But like I said, that's not ideal. We want only 1 tackle to go in the top 4. At least I do. Next up, let's go over another scenario, and then we'll get into some trades. So in my first couple of mock drafts, I had 1 tackle go. I had 2 tackles go. Now we're going to have no tackles go, and we'll see how that could potentially affect what the New York Giants do with their picks. So let's start the draft again. First overall, we'll go Aiden Hutchinson. Same. We'll stick with the same top 2 for now. Kayvon Thibodeau will go 2nd overall. 3rd overall, we said no tackles are going to go. So what could happen? Where could Houston go if they're not going tackle with this spot? Their needs, if you look on the draft chart, is every single position. This team is a complete mess. They could go quarterback. It wouldn't shock me. I know they have Mills, who's in his 2nd year. They could certainly go defense as well. Let's say they fall in love with Trayvon Walker. Let's say the top 3 edge rushers go off the board with the first 3 picks. Jets are on the board. Top 3 edge rushers are off the board. Jets need help in the secondary as well. So I could easily see them taking Sauce Gardner. They could take Kyle Hamilton as well. Let's have them taking Sauce Gardner. Now the Giants are on the clock. It's a no-brainer. Your first pick, you're going offensive tackle, and you're in a dream scenario if you're a fan like me and wants the Giants to go tackle. I would prefer Evan Neal. This is my preference here. I go 5th overall. I get my tackle of the future. I don't have to worry about that position, hopefully, for the next 10 years now between Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas. So that's a no-brainer. In this spot, I don't see any reason to think that my opinion would change with the Carolina Panthers. I'm still going to have them taking Malik Willis. So let's do that. I tried to type in his name to speed it up, but whatever. We'll just scroll down. So let's have them taking Malik Willis. There he is at 6th overall. And then the Giants are up. So much like the other scenarios, we already got our tackle. The only difference in this situation, if you're staying at 5 and 7 for me, is do you at least consider doubling up on the offensive line? I know a lot of Giants fans would want to. They would absolutely love to do that. Aquanu is still on the board. A lot of people are going to be looking at it and say, listen, he's the best available player. We need help on the interior offensive line. You could double up at the position. Here's one thing I certainly worry about if the Giants were to do this. First things first, Joe Schoen has talked about that he has, positional value. He's not, you get the sense that he's probably not going to want to take an interior offensive lineman in the first 7 picks of this year's draft. You probably don't think he's going to take a running back. More than likely, he's not going to take a tight end, a D tackle. He has talked about positional value. Positional value to me is edge, tackle, quarterback for the most part. Lockdown corner as well within the first 7 picks. Maybe a wide receiver. Aquanu, if you were to draft him here, you'd be asking him to play the guard spot, which I wouldn't be upset about. But then the other thing you have to ask yourself if you're a Giant fan, would Aquanu be willing to do that long term? Aquanu's natural position, of course, is the tackle. Some people feel like he transitioned better to the guard position, but Aquanu also knows tackles make a lot more money in the NFL. So I don't know how happy long-term Aquanu would be playing that position, not to mention you'd be tying up a ton of salary to the offensive line, something that New York Giants fans worry about as well. So I don't think they would double up here, if I had to guess. I don't think they would take Aquanu. This would be a prime situation to potentially trade down. I'm not going to do that here. I will have trade down scenarios as this video goes along. But to me, this is a primary spot to trade down for teams that potentially need a tackle, right? You've got the Seattle Seahawks absolutely could use offensive line help, along with several other teams behind us. Maybe even the Jets are willing to move up to get a guy like Aquanu, knowing that Seattle more than likely would take him at 9. So I think I explore the possibility of trading down. But if I'm not going to trade down in this situation, I think that you're probably sticking with what your thought process is. In this situation, Sauce Gardner's off the board, so you're either taking a guy like Stingley, 7th overall, or you're going your best available edge. And your best available edge in this situation, with the top 3 off the board, I mean, it comes down to what you prioritize as a New York Giants fan. Who's your next best available edge? Is it, Jermaine Johnson, right? Ajabo, of course, is hurt, so it's not going to be him. That's probably what you're looking at if you're George Karlaftis as well, if you're not going with Derek Stingley. You could also take Kyle Hamilton, which some Giants fans would certainly want to do. I've seen a lot of Giants fans talk about it, and it's certainly a possibility. I would not be shocked at all if in this exact scenario, the Giants did take Kyle Hamilton. After all, we do have a need at the safety position. Would it be my ideal scenario? No. I personally do not want the Giants to take a safety within the top 7 picks, regardless of how great the player is. Would I be upset if they did it in this scenario? No, absolutely not. You could certainly argue he's the best available player on the board. And if you have questions about a guy like Derek Stingley in terms of his help long term, you could certainly argue that Hamilton's the pick. I think it would come down to how they evaluated these other edge prospects, whether it be, George Karlaftis, whoever it may be, Jermaine Johnson, whether they felt like they were suitable to go 7th overall. I don't want the New York Giants to reach with that pick. In this spot, I'll have them taking Hamilton, even though I think they would at least strongly consider going elsewhere with the edge. But I want to give you guys a different couple of looks. So in this scenario, we went out, we got our tackle, and we got some help in the secondary, and got who many feel could potentially be the best available player in this year's draft. So it's definitely not a bad scenario getting Kyle Hamilton and Evan Neal. The reason we weren't able to, get a prospect, say you would want more at that spot. Well, 3 edge rushers went in the first 3 picks, and the best available cornerback by most people's standards, specifically for the New York Giants defense, went 4th overall. So we got the best tackle off the board, and we ended up getting the safety in Kyle Hamilton. Like I said, in this scenario, though, I strongly consider trading down at 7th overall. I think that's an ideal situation for the Giants to look to trade down. All right, so now, what have we done so far? We've done a scenario where 2 tackles went, where 1 tackle went, and where no tackles went. Now let's do a scenario where I feel it is the ideal scenario for the New York Giants if they stay at 5 and 7. For me, this is the dream scenario. On draft night, when you're watching my stream, if you want to see me smiles ear to ear, this will be the exact scenario in a realistic, in terms of realistic possibilities that I would want to see transpire. First overall, we've heard rumors, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but we've heard rumors that the Jacksonville Jaguars are very intrigued by Trayvon Walker. And as a Giants fan, I'm not upset at all if the Giants get Trayvon Walker at 7th overall. I see the upside. I see the potential. But if you give me the option of potentially laying a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau or Aiden Hutchinson in comparison, that's where I'm leaning. And again, I'm no expert, but that's where I'm leaning. So in a dream scenario, that happens. The Jacksonville Jaguars are absolutely in love with the athletic ability, the athletic upside that Trayvon Walker brings to the table. After all, the guy's 273 pounds. He ran a 4.5 240. Like I said earlier in the video, looked incredible at the combine, right? He was the guy that really stood out. So let's do this. Trayvon Walker goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 2, Detroit Lions. I still think they go edge here. They're going to bring the hometown kid home. They go Aiden Hutchinson. So I have no dream scenario where we get Aiden Hutchinson. But let's continue this. They get Aiden Hutchinson. Next up, Houston Texans. Houston Texans stand pat. They get their long-term piece. They go offensive line. They get Evan Neal. Now, this is where it becomes my dream scenario. The New York Jets are up. And I don't know if I can simulate a trade here. I probably should have looked at that ahead of time. But I'll just talk it out for you guys. The New York Jets are up at 4th overall. The Atlanta Falcons call the New York Jets. They say, we're going to give you a future first-round pick or 3 third-round picks, similar to the situation where the Jets traded up from 6 to 3 to go up and get our quarterback. So in this scenario, Walker goes in the top 4 and Malik Willis goes in the top 4. And I think it's at least possible. I'm not saying it's probable, but we're talking about best-case scenario in a realistic world. The Atlanta Falcons trade up to 4 with the Jets. The Jets trade back. They get a ton of future draft capital. Works out for both teams, right? They want their quarterback. They go up and get their man. Malik Willis goes to the Atlanta Falcons. Now the Giants are up, and suddenly you've got the tackle of your choice outside of who did I have going 3rd overall? I think I had Evan Neal in this scenario. So you got the tackle of your choice between Aquanu and Cross, and you have Kayvon Thibodeau on the board. To me, on draft night, and maybe I'm higher than some of you guys are on Kayvon Thibodeau. This, to me, is my ideal scenario. We all know as Giants fans, we've been starving for that for that edge rusher prospect for years, along with the tackle prospect. Kayvon Thibodeau, who at least in my opinion, if he's not the best overall prospect in this draft, he's damn near close, is staring at us on the board. The only question here is, do you take him at 5 or hope he could get to 7? And it would come down to how high the New York Giants evaluate Thibodeau in comparison to the tackle prospects. If they think Cross and Aquanu are fairly similar, I think you go with Kayvon Thibodeau here. So let's say we take Kayvon Thibodeau at 5th overall. Now, in my dream scenario, quarterback's already off the board, but would I be surprised if the Carolina Panthers took Kenny Pickett? There's been a lot of reports that the Carolina Panthers are interested in Kenny Pickett. I've seen Kenny Pickett going there in several mocks. And even if they didn't do this, by the way, if they took a tackle, if they took a Aquanu or a Cross, I'm still beyond happy that we end up with Kayvon Thibodeau, one of those individuals. But let's say they take Kenny Pickett at 6th overall. Then we're on the board, and I still get Aquanu. That, to me, at least in a semi-realistic world, is the best-case scenario for the New York Giants on draft night. I get Aquanu at 7, and I get Kayvon Thibodeau at 5. Do I think that's going to happen? No, it's why I have not mocked it. Do I think it's at least moderately possible? Sure. It would take somebody banking on a guy like Trayvon Walker's upside and somebody banking on the upside of Malik Willis to feel like he was a good enough prospect to potentially leap up into the top 4 picks to go up and grab him. But if that scenario took place, the New York Giants could realistically end up with that combination. And for me, I can't see many Giants fans being upset on draft night ending up with that duo. So for me, that for me is the dream scenario. Now, let's go over some trade scenarios. And there's a bunch that I could see the New York Giants taking place. And then I'll do one in the second round, which I've talked about in the past, would probably be my dream scenario as well, if the New York Giants were able to trade back up into the tail end of the first round. But let's play this out. Now, I don't know if they let me trade. Yes, they do. So I'm going to make this trade before the draft even starts. First, we'll do a couple of scenarios where the New York Giants trade out of 5, because I think 5 is going to be the more attractive destination for a lot of teams, obviously, due to the fact that it's a higher pick, but even more importantly, due to the fact that Carolina could potentially take a quarterback, right? The first scenario we'll look at is a smaller trade. We'll look at the Giants trading back from 5 to 8. Atlanta could certainly be interested in a quarterback prospect, much like I had taking place in my last mock draft. The other scenario that I feel is semi-realistic would be the New Orleans Saints. The Saints traded up. They got 2 first-round picks at 16 and 19. Reports have come out that they're potentially interested in a quarterback. And you have to question, why would they do that if not to potentially give themselves more ammunition to move up and get said quarterback? So I think if the Giants are going to trade down, those are probably the 2 most realistic possibilities at this point in time. Another spot could potentially be Seattle, but you're probably getting a similar package to what you would get with Atlanta in that spot, being that they're picking 8 and 9. And I think Seattle is going to go offensive line. I really believe that. They could certainly go quarterback, though, for in this draft. But I think they'll go with a 1-year stopgap and take their quarterback next year. So let's do the trade before we start. Let's trade down with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, what could the Giants get for the 8th overall pick if they're trading down from 5? I mean, I go back, like I said earlier in the mock draft, and I look at that Jets trade. The Jets traded up from 6 to 3 to get Sam Darnold. So it was a 3-pick jump. Now, that was worth more than this one because obviously the Colts were picking 3rd, the Giants were picking 5th. The 3rd pick holds more value. What did the Jets give up to make that jump? They gave up the 6th pick, a pick swap from 6 to 3, so they swap picks, and 3 additional second-round picks. So, realistically speaking, I don't think we'd get quite that, being that, we have the 5th pick as opposed to the 3. Maybe you get 2 additional seconds and maybe a future 3rd or 4th, but something at least comparable to what the New York Jets had to give up when they moved up to get Sam Darnold. That is what I'd be looking for in this scenario. At least 2 additional second-round picks. Of course, I want a future first if I could get it, but I don't know if Atlanta's going to be willing to do that for just a 3-pick jump. But if they were, please. But let's start with the Atlanta Falcons. Pick number 8. They're going to trade with the New York Giants at pick number 5. So we're going to give them pick 8. We're going to give them pick 43. Now, I am not going to mock out 2 rounds here, but obviously you're going to be able to fill another need at pick 43. Depending on what we do in the first round, I would talk about what positions I'd be looking at in the second round. So we'll talk about that in a second. And we'll get the second round pick of 2023, and we'll say a future 4th as well. Let's just say that, okay? For the 5th overall pick, we'll force the trade. So now the Giants suddenly have picks at 7 and 8. We're picking back-to-back, okay? Let's start the draft. First overall, we'll stick with what we've been doing. We'll go Aiden Hutchinson. We'll go Kayvon Thibodeau, 2nd overall. We'll go with Aquanu to the Houston Texans. Jets, we will go... You know what? Let's go Sauce to the Jets. 5th overall, they went up. They got their quarterback, right? So we will go with Malik Willis, the Atlanta Falcons. 6th overall, Carolina Panthers. I think the Panthers here, much like I've said, are leaning quarterback. And they may very well go offensive line here. Easily could go offensive line. But I'm not going to have that. I am going to have them taking... Why is this doing this? Trying to make this as clean as I possibly can for you guys. So I apologize for the screw-ups here and there. Looking for Kenny Pickett. Where are you? Kenny Pickett is so bad that I'm on the 2nd page. That's how bad he is. There he is. Kenny Pickett goes 6th overall to the Carolina Panthers. Then the New York Giants are up. And this is a great spot. We traded back. We got a future second, a future 4th, and an additional 2nd in this year's draft. And we still had, I think it's 2 tackles dropped to us. Yeah, with Charles Cross and Evan Neal. Do I think that'll happen? Maybe, maybe not. Carolina probably could have easily taken Evan Neal. If they did, I take Charles Cross at 7. Either way, I think you still get a tackle with that 7th pick. I think you're pretty much guaranteed, especially if Atlanta's trading up to get a quarterback, which you could only assume they'd be doing. You're going to end up with either Evan Neal or Charles Cross with that pick. In this spot, it's great. We end up with Evan Neal. I mean, that's ideal, right? You get Evan Neal at 7. You pay him a little less than what you would have paid him at 5. And we get the additional pick at 8th overall. And I think you're kind of in a similar spot to what we were last time, where you have to ask yourself, what do you prioritize here? Is it edge? Is it corner? Is James Bradbury still on the roster? Trayvon Walker probably makes the most sense. He's got a ton of upside. You get him there. Like I said earlier, you could go Stingley. Are you worried about the injury concern, so on and so forth? Maybe Kyle Hamilton's a possibility, but I think this is probably most realistic in this spot. So in this scenario, the Giants got their tackle. They got their edge with some upside at 7 and 8. They got the 43rd overall pick in this year's draft, a future 2nd and a future 4th. So what are the Giants looking to do with that additional pick? I think you're taking a cornerback or safety for sure with one of your second-round picks at this point because you haven't addressed it at 7 or 8. So Petrie is a popular name, as I said earlier in the video. Safety, there's a number of safeties that the Giants can certainly take in the second round. You may even take both of those positions with those 2 picks, or you could couple those picks and potentially trade back up into the first round to maybe get an interior offensive lineman. If a guy like Zion Johnson drops something along those lines, or if one of those guys drops to 36. So it keeps all your options open. But to me, this is a very good scenario. This is one of the better scenarios I could see playing out if the Giants were to do a small trade like that, still end up with a pretty high-end edge rusher, get one of the better tackles in the draft. Worst case scenario in this spot, let's say Carolina did take Evan Neal, like we said. We then get Charles Cross and Trayvon Walker, still get the 43rd overall pick, a future second and a future 4th. So, or even take out the 4th, 2 future seconds. So that's a pretty good scenario for me if the New York Giants were to look to trade down. Let's do another trade down scenario from the 5th pick, and then we'll do 2 scenarios from we'll do 1 scenario from the 7th pick. All right. So here we go. We'll do this one more time. 5th pick. Now we're going to have the New York Giants trading further back from the 5th overall pick, right? Let's make the trade before we start. So we're going to do the Giants. We're going to do the New Orleans Saints. Saints are picking at 16 and 19 after the trade with the Philadelphia Eagles. So let's say the Giants end up with those 2 picks. They come up, they get the 5th pick from the New York Giants. And let's say you tack on a second round pick in 2023. That'd be nice. If I'm trading back from 5 to 16 or 19, I better be getting something pretty damn good. But maybe you only end up with 16 and 19. I don't know exactly, how they would prioritize these things. I think the goal for the Giants should be to get future draft capital if they're trading down, though. The more future draft capital you get, the better. Of course, the Saints don't have a future first. I'd be aiming for that because they traded it with the Philadelphia Eagles. But let's force this trade. Now the Giants suddenly are picking at 7, 16, and 19. And this is where it gets a little more difficult to do a mock. I'll try my best. But, what positions we'd be looking at in those spots. Let's start the draft. First overall, we'll stick with it. Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau. We'll go with Ekwonu. Jets, we'll go with Gardner. Saints came up to get their quarterback, so they'll go Willis. We'll go Carolina going tackle here instead of going quarterback. I think that's very realistic. They go Evan Neal. Giants here at 7. I think you have to factor in that there's a big drop-off at the tackle spot after Cross. Some Giants fans may not love it. Some may say wait till 16 to 19 to get Penning. You don't even know if Penning's going to get there in this spot, by the way, because Seattle could easily take a tackle. So I think you have to shore that up. You don't have another pick till 16. It's such a big need. You get one of the 3 best tackle prospects in this draft class. So I think we're going to go Charles Cross at 7. 8 to the Falcons. We'll say the Falcons go. I mean, the Falcons have so many needs. We'll go Trayvon Walker to the Falcons. Seattle. I think Seattle has to go line. I really do. Like, that is such a big need for this football team, but there's not a lot of great linemen left. I mean, to me, Penning is a pretty big reach at 9th overall. I don't know if they would go that route. They could go quarterback. You know what? Let's give him a quarterback. Let's give him Pickett. We'll go Kenny Pickett to the Seattle Seahawks. Jets are up. Jets, I'm going to have them take a Kyle Hamilton here. I don't think Hamilton will get out of the top 10, and they could use some help in the secondary. They could go Stingley. Washington, they're not going quarterback. They, of course, just traded for Carson Wentz. So what could they do? I mean, I don't know their team well enough to probably say exactly what they would do in this spot, but I think their offensive line is decent, at least according to this. They could use some help on the interior. Linebacker's a possibility. Let's just, I don't know. I'm going to have Stingley going to Minnesota, so I'm not going to have him here. I don't really think they need much help on the edge. Because they need a linebacker or an interior lineman. They may go interior lineman here. Might be a little bit early by some people's standards to take a guy, say, like Tyler Linderbaum, or to take one of the 2 guards that are very highly thought of in this draft, Zion Johnson being one of them. So, you know what? To keep this thing moving, we'll have them going with Sorry, guys. I just want to make the right pick. It's probably not. But I'll have them going with you know what? Let's have them take Linderbaum. They say they need a center. We'll have a little bit of a reach there. Probably won't do it, but for the sake of the draft, that's what we'll do. We'll have Minnesota going with a corner. We'll have them going with Stingley. Houston, every need, right? They need everything known to man. So they took tackle with their first pick. I mean, they need everything. What's the most important position outside of a tackle if you're not going quarterback? Probably edge. And you got George Karlaftis still on the board. We'll have them taking George Karlaftis. Baltimore up next. They need help on the defensive line. They need help on the offensive line as well. I've seen a lot of mocks where they take Linderbaum at 14. They could use some help on the interior. Could a guy like perhaps Jordan Davis make sense here? Why not? Let's take Jordan Davis to the Baltimore Ravens. Then you got the Philadelphia Eagles on the clock. They need help all over that defense. DB as well. They could take a guy like McDuffie. They could certainly go linebacker as well. I think they need a linebacker. They've needed a linebacker forever. They go wide receiver too. Of course, they still have 2 first-round picks. I'll have them take a Devin Lloyd. I think they need help with the linebacker. Now the Giants are up. What do we take with our first pick? I forgot. We took the tackle, right? We took Charles Cross. So what's our next biggest needs? All over. But what are the most important positions? Edge rusher, cornerback. That's probably what I'm looking at. And potentially interior offensive line at 16 and 19. So, or wide receiver. You know, if you say love a guy like Garrett Wilson, and probably should have had Garrett Wilson going earlier. I could definitely see a wide receiver off the board at this point in time. It is what it is. So they could certainly take a guy like Garrett Wilson. I kind of want to do this over because they probably a couple wide receivers would have been off the board at this point. But I think the Giants here still focus on the edge, and they go out and get Jermaine Johnson. He's a popular guy amongst Giant fans. A lot of Giants fans like him. May not be there at the 16th overall pick, but I think you're looking at an edge or potentially a cornerback with that pick, as well as interior offensive line. Everything I've heard about the Chargers, they need help at the corner. They also need help on the interior defensive line. And they could use some help at the wide receiver spot. I'm going to have my first wide receiver off the board. I just think it's too late at this point. There probably should have been at least 1 or 2 off the board already. I'll have Garrett Wilson going to the Chargers. Then the Philadelphia Eagles are up. Same thing. I'm going to have the Eagles taking a wide receiver. There's a ton left. We'll have them taking Chris Olave. So the 2 Ohio State wide receivers go back-to-back. And then the Giants are up again. And here, if you're the Giants, you could look at a guy like Trent McDuffie, who a lot of people have mocked going to the Chargers at 17. We need help at the cornerback spot, right? So I think that's probably the first name I'm looking at. You could look at a guy like Drake London, could certainly use help at the wide receiver spot. Obi Dean. You could also obviously look at interior offensive line. Zion Johnson rings a bell, right? So that's definitely a guy that I'm considering with this pick. Kenyon Green, right? I would absolutely love Kenyon Green here. I would absolutely love it. And you could still wait until pick 36 to try to address that secondary. You know what? I think that's what I would want to do. So let's do it. So in this scenario, the New York Giants end up with Kenyon Green. They end up with Jermaine Johnson. And they end up with Charles Cross. For me, not the ideal scenario. It's a good scenario, though. You fill a lot of holes. You got yourself a right tackle. You got yourself an edge. And you got yourself an interior offensive lineman. So you don't really have to worry. And you're not paying that guard that much money. It's the 19th overall pick. So I think that's a pretty good scenario there. You could go wide receiver, though. Like I said, you could go corner. You could go safety. There's a lot of options that the Giants could be looking at the further they trade back into this draft. And then finally, we'll have the Giants trading out of the 7 pick with those 2 selections. But to me, it's kind of the same thing. At 5, you're probably going tackle. It may just be Evan Neal as opposed to a guy like Charles Cross. And you're going to be looking at the same grouping of players if you're trading back to 16th to 19th. So it's not really worth doing that simulation, at least in my opinion. So that's the way I look at it. For me, the absolute dream scenario for the New York Giants would be Malik Willis goes in the top 4 along with a guy like Trayvon Walker. And then the possibility of getting Kayvon Thibodeau and one of the high-end tackles opens up. If we're going to trade down, I think the 2 most realistic spots were those 2 teams that I talked about, the Saints and the Falcons. Seattle being a possibility. People talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. There's no way in hell I'm trading that far back. Another scenario in which I like, which I didn't do the simulation, would be trading back up into the first round to get an interior offensive lineman, a guy like Kenyon Green, a guy like Zion Johnson. That would be another ideal scenario for me if it made sense. It would have to be in the 25 to 27 range. I wouldn't give up a ton to move up and go up and get that player. But if they were to fall to that range, I would certainly explore it if I were the New York Giants. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.